Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Vibin It. Thank you for being here. We are so excited for yet another awesome episode to bring you inspiration and clarity and motivation and all the good high vibe things that you guys love to receive from us. We love to give them to you. So today we have a very, very special guest. Her name is Julie Parker, and I'm actually going to let her introduce herself because I don't want to put her in any boxes. But today we're going to talk about something very exciting that I think most feminine creatures will be excited to dive into and learn about. So Julie, thanks for joining us. Can you tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, this seems like such a simple question, doesn't it?
I
And
know.
thank you both for having me on your wonderful show. I'm really appreciative of being here. Do you know, I'm just simply going to say, for the context of this, what I know is going to be really juicy, wonderful chat, that I'm a priestess and I hold space for women all over the world to connect to their divinity and find their sacred leader within.
Beautiful. Can you talk to us a little bit about your definition of a priestess? Because when I hear this word, it sounds very mysterious, and I would love to hear your interpretation of.
Well, firstly, can I say thank you so much for asking for my interpretation of it? Because if you were to ask many different women who considered themselves to be a priestess around the world, they would probably give you a different definition to me, even though there would likely be aspects of it that would have similarities and connections. I think it's the same if you were to ask someone what a witch is. You know, there are going to be different interpretations of that. But within the modern context, my definition of a priestess is that they are a sacred leader, and that in particular, they are someone, as I mentioned when I first popped on the conversation, the call today, who holds space for, in particular, other women to connect to their own divinity and find their own leader within. And so what that means is that there is an element to the priestess that is about service. She is not somebody that is a solo practitioner in any way. She might be a solopreneur, work by herself in certain aspects, but her work involves being in service to other people and usually other women. So that's what a priestess means to me. That's the definition for me. Now, what she can do in that level of service is something that is as vast as our hearts. You know, she may be a crystal healer. She might be a life coach. She might be a red tent maven. She might be somebody that works extensively with essential oils and plant medicine and magic. It could come in many, many different forms. She also could be, you know, a leader in a political office. You know, like sometimes I think of the New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, for example, and I look at her and her leadership, and gosh, I feel like I'm looking at a priestess. You know, she is a sacred sovereign leader who is doing so much for leadership from the capacity of empathy, compassion, respect, love. And she's the Prime Minister of that country. She holds the highest office in that land. And so we don't all look the same. We don't necessarily do the same things. So we don't float around wearing caftans and flower crowns all the time. You know, that's photo shoot stuff. And yeah, it's wonderful. It's a really, really amazing thing if someone feels called to that type of leadership in their life.
I think I'm a priestess. Kelsey,
You
you
know
might
what?
be a priestess too.
I think it is highly likely that both of you are, and that many, many women, you know, listening to this podcast
Yeah.
could in fact be that, and maybe not necessarily, you know, realize, because the world of the priest, this is not new. You know, this is not a fancy new age word that's just kind of popped up in the modern context. It's been reclaimed. You know, the world of the priestess has existed since ancient times
Mm-hmm.
in cultures, in Mayan culture, Roman, Greek, the Norse culture, all cultures, Celtic, Japanese, Chinese, so many different cultures throughout the world had women leaders who were considered to be sacred spiritual leaders within their communities, and doing a variety of different things. Back in those days, they were conduits of the gods and goddesses. That's a little bit different today, but still the work that we do is, the heart of it, I think, is very similar.
So where do you feel called the most in your, or rather in this practice of priestesshood? Is that the word?
Yeah,
Priestess,
priestessing, I would
priestessing.
probably
Okay.
say. Yeah, priestessing.
Where do you find your most like innate natural ability lies in terms of like helping others, or I don't know, creating that community and that space for people?
Hmm. You know, I think for me, the thing that has most taken my heart about this path is the concept and lived experience of sovereignty,
Mm.
and the connection of sovereignty to sacred leadership. That has just really taken my heart in this world and work, because if it's one thing that I've come to really know and understand, is that it's not possible to be a sacred leader, to be a really powerful, effective, compassionate, leading priestess, if you are not working on your own sovereignty in your life. And what that means is you really having a look at how reliant you are upon the praise of others, you know, how much you are truly independent and have your own back, how much you have the capacity to be self-motivated, self-starting, really, really do things independently and on your own. And I think that so often when we begin to peel back these layers and look at our shadow and look at these sides of ourselves, many of us can realize that we're actually more dependent upon the opinion and support of others than we might like to think that we are. And when I say that, I don't mean for any moment that it's not okay to call for help. It's not okay to lean on others. It's not okay to ask for support. It absolutely is. But I think all of us can probably relate in some way or another to the fact that we feel heartbroken if, you know, we share a post on social media and it doesn't get the traction that we want, you know, or we launch something as a program and, you know, it doesn't go as well as we think it might, or we fall into a comparison trap, you know, through social media or in our businesses or in our lives, comparing our bodies or our way of being or how much we're earning with others. All of these things take away from our sovereignty. And so for me, exploring that world and helping women to be independent, sacred leaders who are connected beautifully to other people, but firstly and foremostly, and most of all, themselves, is to me the thing that has the biggest chunk of my heart with this work.
So important too. Kelsey, I saw you scribbling. What you got? Oh, you're on mute. I took some notes because I didn't want to forget what I was going to say, because this is so timely, of course, as the universe would have it. This morning, I was snooping in one of my boyfriend's books that he's reading. Well, I wasn't snooping. I bought it for him. So I also kind of wanted to read it. So I was skimming through, and it was this really cool book about the masculine archetypes of like king, warrior, lover, and there's one other one that I'm forgetting. But when they were describing the king archetype, they were saying that the king, one of his main purposes is to keep himself in good health and good standing and good well-being, because in ancient times, like if the king isn't doing well, the crops are suffering, or it's not raining, and like everything in the king's land, in the king's world, is going to do as well as he is doing, which is just like the basic law of attraction principle of
Right.
like your vibration is creating your reality. And people really understood that back then. And I think it's important that you touched on this from the feminine dynamic, which is like even though you're taking care of all these other people and you're holding space and you're being of service, first and foremost, you have to be connected to yourself and taking care of yourself and loving yourself and holding space for yourself, because that can be reflected outwardly in your reality and in your relationships. So I just thought that was a fun thing to talk about, because I was just reading about that this morning and I just said it again.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it how these things come into our field so powerfully when we open ourselves up to them. And Kelsey, you are 100% right. It always impacts, you know. It's like, you know, you can't be a wonderful coach or priestess or space holder or healer if when you are in the presence of others, your ego is running wildly through your mind all the time with things like, am I doing this right? Does she like me? I'm screwing this up. I'm not getting this right. You know, I'm not as good as that person that I saw on Instagram yesterday, etc., etc. This is what I talk about when I talk about sovereignty. You know, those are the sorts of things that when we start to experience them significantly are calling for us to heal, you know, because if we want to be the really amazing sacred spiritual leaders that we are, it's not about taking another course to be a better public speaker. You know, it's like that's just the surface level stuff. It is about, what do I need to do to really heal myself and keep bringing myself back to wholeness constantly, so that I can be, and this is one of the great modes, I guess, of the priestess, so that I can be, that she can be an empty vessel. Somebody that has the capacity to hold such powerful space for someone that it's like she almost doesn't even exist in that exchange, that it's all about the people or person that is in front of her. Because when we're in presence with people like that, that's when our own healing has the capacity to take up all the space that it requires, and we don't feel any energetic pushback of, you're too much, this is too much, I can't hold this for you, etc. And so the great work of the priestess, it comes from all inside first.
So I want to know, how long have you known that this was who you are, and what was your kind of journey to discovering this priestessing, this amazing work that you do?
This is a question that I love, Lindsay, and I often get asked it in interviews, and it always makes me smile, because it actually, the realization or the real start of the path for me as a priestess from a conscious perspective actually began when I was interviewing someone.
Ooh.
Yes, isn't that fascinating? It's like, it was very, very strange, and something that I wasn't expecting to happen at all. Now, later on, I was to realise that I'd actually come from a whole lineage of priestesses, and I can share that with you. But I was interviewing an amazing woman for a magazine, and I asked her the question to share with us, to share with our readers, what she considered to be the greatest learnings and education that she'd undertaken in her life that was now contributing to what was her incredible success. And she said, well, I've taken lots of courses in my life and I've done lots of things and education-wise, but she said, I would have to say that it is my path as a priestess that has offered me the most significant impact in my life. I'd never heard of this word before.
And your ears went, whoop, what was that?
My ears went straight up. Exactly. My heart just kind of exploded. I had goosebumps all over my body, and I felt like this tingling, like this rising. It was
that sounds like activation.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it was. And honestly, I swear the rest of the interview was probably really bad, because I just completely lost my place with her, because I was like, what is happening to me? You know, and immediately afterwards, I just dove down the rabbit hole, Alice in Wonderland style, of exploring the entire world of the priestess. And it was within a couple of days, a few weeks, a couple of months later, and I kept it very private and to myself to begin with, that I realized I am actually one of these. this is describing me. This is what I do, and this is what I've always done. I've just never known it, thanks to the patriarchy and keeping everything suppressed and quiet and all of those sorts of things. It's like, oh my gosh, this is me. And so I then stepped into it deeper and deeper. And then when I started to do some ancestral healing and work, I really came to realize that my mother and grandmother and so many other women in my family, while they would never have called themselves a priestess because they didn't even know that that was such a thing, when I looked at their lives and what they had done in service to other women and girls and their community through their work, through volunteering, through their activism, I was like, oh, okay, this is real. Like, I might have only found out about this now, which is about 7 years ago now, but this is in fact part of my DNA.
So can we touch on, you mentioned briefly about your Celtic lineage. Can we talk about that?
Of course
Lindsay's
we
obsessed.
Because pretty sure that I'm the same. I mean, I'm so obsessed with my Celtic heritage, but I don't know enough about it. So I want to hear your story.
Well, I am one of those white Anglo-Saxon people that very much has the overwhelming core of her DNA, and cultural lineage is from particularly from Scotland. And also my dad was born in Scotland and spoke with a very thick Scottish accent his entire life.
Oh my God, you're my new best friend. It's such an unhealthy thing that I have with Scotland. I can't explain it. It's so weird. Anyway.
Have you been? Oh, you must go.
I've been twice, and I insisted that I had Scottish DNA. And this is like, I told this story last week on the episode, but I didn't have it, and then I did. So they updated my results. I'm not even kidding. And I'm 34% Scottish.
Oh, wow.
28% like regular English. No offense to my Brits. But that's like overwhelming majority of my DNA. And I just feel so vindicated. Because I felt it. You know what I mean? Anyway, back to you.
Oh, no, that's completely fine. I understand. I feel very connected to my Scottish heritage as well. But then I've got some English, Irish and Welsh mixed in there as well. And I have an interesting streak of about 12 to 15% of Greek and Italian and Balkan, that's in there, which is an interesting little mix in there. But I very much, Australia, where I am from, we are, of course, we're originally a British colony, from the white settler perspective, of course, there have been Indigenous folk here, and this is their land and always will be for many, many thousands of years before we were. But that is the line that I come from. And the reason it became very important to me to really explore my Celtic lineage and ancestry and history, actually a lot of it had to do not just with me personally, but with a lot of cultural appropriation that I began to see playing out in various different spiritual communities by white people, in particular white women. And I just couldn't understand why it was that time and time again I saw so many white women taking, using and appropriating in ways that were not appreciative but were actually damaging and destructive practices from other cultures that were not theirs. They simply were not theirs to own and not theirs to make money from and not theirs to, lead with. And part of that, I think, has to do with that a lot of white people somehow or another are disconnected from their own culture or think that they don't have it.
Right.
And in fact, that's not true at all. And all of us have beautiful and incredible spiritual practices that we can explore. And when we do that from our own cultural lineages, it is so powerful and it is so potent because we're doing things that once upon a time women and other people within our own cultures and our own family, our own blood once did. And we're
Yeah.
carrying on those traditions. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't appreciate and can't admire things from other cultures, and maybe we've had experiences of being taught in new lineages, but that's very different to
Right.
running the local new age shop and buying smudging sticks and dream catchers and then somehow or another incorporating those into your work when they are in fact First Nations
Mm-hmm.
practices that deeply belong and have spiritual meaning only to even particular people within those cultures. It's not these are the things that some people don't understand. I've had conversations with Indigenous people where they've said, actually, even within our culture, unmarried women are not supposed to do that.
Interesting.
It's not just about that. There's so many other things. It's like you see at Burning Man and Coachella and things like that, young white women running around in headdresses. They're not worn by women at all within Native
Yeah.
American culture. They are only supposed to be worn by men and men who are chiefs of communities. That's just one example that's been shared with me. It's not just, there are so many things that, I'm very passionate about this topic, as you can
Yeah.
tell. I just think that it's something that exploring our own ancestry is not only so deeply respectful of others, and making sure that we're in right relationships with other cultures,
Yeah.
but also that we explore it for ourselves because it deepens our own spiritual practice.
Yeah. And I love that you said that because I definitely believe in, like a universal truth. Okay. Without getting too controversial, there's a million different versions of basically the same idea. And I can guarantee you, your ancestry probably has something that you can grab onto that isn't, as you say, damaging to other cultures. I really like that you touched on that. I am very excited to find out now, like all of my ancestors, like what they used to do and their rituals and stuff. I might be a witch. I don't know. I'm still deciding.
I'm still deciding.
If
Well,
that
yeah,
means-
and you know what, Lindsay, that's a really great thing to say, because often when women begin to feel a calling to explore these sorts of things, you will gravitate more towards one than the other.
Yeah.
Priestesses and witches are different.
Yeah.
They contain lots of similarities, but they are different, and you often find that you will be more called to one than the other.
Now, would you say, I don't know if you know this might be a silly question, is a druid closer to a priestess or a witch? Do you know? Or is it completely different?
No, it's not completely different. A druid or a druidess is, it's a Celtic term, as you
Mhm.
know, and it's closer to priestess.
Okay.
And so in some Celtic aspects, there would be some women that would prefer to be called a druidess than a priestess. That would be their preference. And so they can be used a little bit interchangeably. Most people in the modern context seem to gravitate more towards priestess, but druids and druidesses were, once again, in ancient Celtic times, they were those people in communities that were considered to be spiritual leaders.
Yeah.
They were conduits of the gods and goddesses. They held ritual, they held ceremony. And so, yeah, there's more of a connection there to priestess than witch.
Because I'm super called to that word.
Right,
I don't
there
know.
you go.
I'm gonna have to look into it. I'm gonna have to look
Yeah.
I
into it,
have a
Julie.
personal question since I have
Yes.
the priestess expert
Oh.
here on. What can you tell me just to get me interested about Mayan priestesses? Because I know I come from Mayan descent, but I don't actually know that much. So I guess that's my invitation to study more. But do you know any interesting things that you could share?
Well, I actually speak to Mayan priestesses in my book on the priestess.
Ooh.
One of the things I wanted to do in that book was include information about different cultural aspects of the priestess around the world. And so, yeah, what can I tell you about Mayan priestesses? Well, I can let you know that they were extraordinarily revered and powerful. They were considered more often than not to be oracles. And so they were very much looked towards to be for their psychic abilities, for their abilities to predict, their abilities to forecast what was coming in the future. They were extremely politically powerful. Mind priestesses were held, and this is not uncommon in other cultures as well, but they were held very close to the most powerful men and people of the day. And so they were not that far away from whomever was king, whomever was governor, whomever was the chief of staff at the White House of the day. They were, you know, those Mayan priestesses were not very far away. They were, Kelsey, extremely connected to the moon. And so there were a lot of lunar influences and practices with Mayan priestesses. And the last thing to let you know, hold your breath, clear your throat. They also were one of the priestess collectives, which sounds, you know, you kind of have to hold your breath for it for a moment, but they also partook in ritual sacrifice.
I knew you were gonna say that.
Yes,
Yeah, mine's
yeah.
hardcore, so that doesn't surprise me.
not just of the animal kind, but of the
Right.
people kind. And so clearly, now of course, back in those days, and this is a whole other topic in itself, and I don't know an enormous amount about, but it was considered to be just an extraordinary honor.
Right.
You know, an extraordinary honor to be sacrificed, to sacrifice your life, to ascend to the gods and goddesses in that way. It is, of course, now, you know, called murder.
Right.
And so we don't go there.
And I think in this day and age too, people are like so self-centered. They're like, well, I don't want to be fucking sacrificed. Like, I'm going to be the loser who's sacrificed. Like, are you kidding me? But back then, if people had a whole different perspective about it, then I can understand why it was a more powerful spiritual thing. Lindsay, we went
I just
into
have
a
to
crazy
say,
topic of conversation when you were gone for
I
that
had
minute.
to run and get my baby who just woke up, and my husband was looking for his phone. But I came back to murder and sacrifice.
Yeah.
I feel like I missed the best part of this episode. What is happening?
Yeah, no,
You're going to have to go back and listen.
That happened when you were gone, Lindsay. It was kind of like if you needed to tend to a little one. I'm kind of glad that you weren't here. We're talking about Mayan priestesses.
I mean,
anybody that's watched Vikings on TV, you'll know that the Norse engaged in ritual sacrifice of people. You know, the Mayans were not the only ones, but interestingly enough, priestesses of Mayan descent actually played a significant role in that. But the main thing to let you know, Kelsey, is that they were extraordinarily powerful and very, very revered.
I like this. This is all feeling nice in my body as you say it. I mean, maybe I'm not down to sacrifice anyone in this day and age, but maybe I was back in the day, you know? Like, Mayans are badass motherfuckers.
well, look,
so.
and what's normal is normal, you know? Like it wasn't
Right.
it wasn't at all the same idea that we have about it now. And that's another thing that's so interesting. Remember, Julie and Kelsey, when I said chances are there's a practice or a ritual that it spans across all different cultures. Like, isn't that not hilarious at all? But isn't that so strange that people who never would have come into contact with each other have the same kind of like spiritual rituals? It's just so fascinating to me that they have the same idea. And that's just one of them. There's hundreds of them that are very, very similar.
Oh, you're so true. It's like, you know, different cultures from an ancient perspective around the world, you know, just one example, have used smoke clearing, smudging, or smoke cleansing in some form or another. Lindsay, when you begin to explore this for yourself in the Celtic line, you know, our version of smudging is called sensing or seining. Okay, and it is very, very similar to what I have seen in First Nations and other practices.
Yeah.
It's just done with different things, and it's called different things. You know, Celtic people used mugwort and rosemary and different types of leaves and plants and twigs to do their smoke cleansing and clearing. But yes, smoke, water, fire, there are very, very similar and or at least connected rituals to those things throughout the world. And it's just really wonderful to explore what they mean within our own cultures.
I cannot wait. And it is really unfortunate that, okay, it's a good thing and not a good thing. I'll tell you why. So I feel like I have to mention that we as white people are the ones who have these records for the most part. You know, we can go back and we've kept records for hundreds of years. And unfortunately, we've either destroyed the records of other cultures or they just don't have them. So if we have this resource, look into it. And I'm so fascinated and excited to do that. I know that people listening are like, wonder what mine are. You know,
I feel like
get
everyone's about to go down a huge rabbit hole,
Yeah.
and I'm excited about it.
I'm
Well,
psyched.
Hey there, thanks for watching this video. If you'd like to watch the extended version where you get the full podcast episode in a video format, just go to patreon.com/highvibe. The link is in the description. That's where you can become a supporter of the show, listen to all the episodes via video format, and each week you get extended versions of the show, meaning you get to see the pregame behind the scenes, and also you get an extended interview with whoever we're guesting, or if it's me and Lindsay, we usually pull cards for you guys, fun stuff like that. So go check it out. There's lots of cool goodies, including a free copy of my book, a free audio hypnosis from Lindsay. She's a hypnotherapist. And yeah, we just want to give you all the goods, all the content. So head over to patreon.com/highvibe to become a Patreon.
Or if you'd rather listen to the rest of this episode, head over to highvibinit.com where you'll see all the links to everywhere that it's getting streamed. Click your favorite one and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for listening.